So the bacteria or the fungus or the virus or by that means or parasites. So there is a lot of infection to be treated. And the topic which we are discussing now is the chemotherapy topic. The chemotherapy topic, mainly we have two important concepts to understand. One chemotherapy is the cancer chemotherapy, which we'll discuss later. And the chemotherapy which I'm discussing is the antimicrobials. So what we are discussing is the antimicrobials. That means we have to kill or inhibit the growth of this microbes. Now, what are the microbes which are going to cause infection in a man? It is mainly the bacteria. Then another is the virus. So we are all had to be locked in because of the virus, that is COVID-19. Then the fungus. Then the parasites. So parasites, elements. Right. So these are the drugs. So these are the organisms which we need to kill them. Otherwise, they will infect the humans and they will try to cause the disease. Now, first and foremost, I will take one by one. First, we'll take up the antibacterial drugs, and later we'll cover other aspect. So here, I'll be discussing mainly the antibacterial drugs. Now, moving on to the bacterial infection. First and foremost, I just want to give an overview. What are the bacterial infection we come across? Just see how many infections a human being has to undergo. See, so we have taken from the brain. So there is bacterial meningitis, then otitis media, pneumonia, which is called as community-acquired atypical pneumonia, and also the infection which affects the lung, that is tuberculosis, the skin infections, then the sexually transmitted diseases, then coming to the eye infections, sinusitis, upper respiratory tract infection, then gastritis, food infections, and urinary tract infections. So many other. So broadly, we have gram-positive bacteria, gram-negative bacteria, and also the anaerobes and atypical bacteria also. So these are the major infections which are being asked in the exams and which are being seen in your practice, and that's why the examiner is priority asking these infections. So this is the overall view. These are the infections. So let us see how we can kill the bacteria or inhibit its growth. So with that introduction, let me start with the topic antibacterial drugs. So first, to start is the antibacterial drugs. Now, before going to the bacterial drug, you need to understand one concept. There is a concept called antibiotic. Now, what do you understand by the term antibiotics? What do you understand by it? It is simply, for example, you all know a classical drug, and that drug is called penicillin. Now, we use penicillin to kill bacteria. So, we use penicillin to kill bacteria. Now, where did we get this penicillin from? Where did we get this penicillin from? We got this penicillin. So, the source of this penicillin is a fungus. So, there is a fungus called Penicillium notatum. From there, we got this fungus, penicillin. Now, this is obtained from fungus and it kills the bacteria. And that is what we call as antibiotic. So, the rule number one, it has to obtain from other microbial source. And rule number two, it has to kill another microbe. So antibiotic, the name itself is telling you anti, it will produce an anti against the biotic. So that is called antibiotic. So it should be obtained from organism, then kill another organism. That is called antibiotic. Now, can we get this antibiotics or any drug to kill the bacteria like this? No, you can synthesize in the lab. You can synthesize an antimicrobial in the lab. So what is an antimicrobial? Antimicrobial is a broader concept. So it is the drug which are included in this is antibiotics will come in this or any drug that is synthesized in the lab. So all this which kill or stop the multiplication of the bacteria, they come under antimicrobials. So the general rule is all antimicrobials are not antibiotics, but all antibiotics are antimicrobials. Yeah. So let me repeat, all antibiotics are antimicrobials, but all antimicrobials are not antibiotics because the rule is antibiotics should be obtained from one organism and it should kill the other organism. But synthetic drugs, they are not obtained from any organism, but they will kill the bacteria. That's why they are called. They all come under a broad term that is called antimicrobials. Right. So we are discussing here the antibacterial drugs. So we'll discuss that. Now, whenever there is growth of bacteria, let me take you a graph and show you. Now in the y-axis I will represent the time when the bacteria is multiplying, and in y-axis I will show the growth of bacteria. Now, if you trace the growth of bacteria, so there will be a lag phase, and suddenly there is increasing growth of bacteria and it will become stationary later. Now, the antimicrobial which we give should start working. Now, there are two types of antimicrobials. Before going to that graph, I'll write two types of antibacterials. One is called bactericidal, and one more category is called bacteriostatic. So, one more category is called bacteriostatic. Now, what is the literal meaning of that? Cidal is the one which kills the bacteria. So, it will kill the bacteria. So, that is called bactericidal. What is static? Static, the name itself is telling you that it stops. What does it stop? It stops multiplication of bacteria. So multiplication of bacteria. Then if it stops the multiplication of bacteria, then who will kill them? Obviously, when you stop the multiplication of bacteria, they're very fast multiplying. Then our immunity is there, that will kill. But where do you use a bactericidal? The bactericidals are mainly used when our bacteria is multiplying very, very fast. It is multiplying so fast so that our immunity cannot kill them at all. So then bactericidals are very useful, they will kill them very fast. So these are the two concepts, what is cidal and static. So as the topic goes on, you'll understand multiplication of bacteria. So multiplication of bacteria. Then if it stops the multiplication of bacteria, then who will kill them? Obviously, when you stop the multiplication of bacteria, they're very fast multiplying. Then our immunity is there, that will kill. But where do you use a bactericidal? The bactericidals are mainly used when our bacteria is multiplying very, very fast. It is multiplying so fast so that our immunity cannot kill them at all. So then bactericidals are very useful, they will kill them very fast. So these are the two concepts, what is cidal and static. So as the topic goes on, you'll understand what are the drugs which are cidal and static. Now moving on to the same graph which I told you, the x-axis is time and the y-axis is growth of bacteria. In order to kill any bacteria, there is a concentration that has to be achieved by the antibacterial drug, that is antimicrobial. And the minimum concentration that has to be achieved is MIC. We call it as minimum inhibitory concentration. So what is that minimum inhibitory concentration? It is the minimum amount of drug, that is antimicrobial, required to stop multiplication of 50% of bacteria. So it is the minimum amount of drug required to stop multiplication of 50% of bacteria. Suppose you incubate a bacteria in a plate, in this type of plate, and they will multiply. So in that, to inhibit 50%, what is the minimum amount of antimicrobial that is required is called MIC. Similar to we have discussed in general focus, right? MEC, minimum effective concentration per drug. Same thing here. So this MIC should be achieved. then only the drug will work. Now, how do you identify whether a drug is sidal or static? Suppose we give a drug, let us assume that we give a drug A. We give a drug A. Now, what happens when I start drug A? This bacterial multiplication, how does it change when I give a drug A? The multiplication which is going up, it will change like this. So immediately the bacteria are killed. So what happens later is, this graph, if we are giving a sidal drug, the multiplication will progress further and they will dig down like this. They will dig down like this. So that is for sidal drugs. What about the static drugs? What about the static drugs? So just a minute, some bit of correction here, just to show you this thing. This graph, let me trace one thing. See here, the graph let me trace here. And the macro multiplication in case of sidal drug immediately will fall like this. The multiplication of bacteria will immediately fall like this. But let me take one more color, it will make it easier for you to understand. But if it is a static, the multiplication is going on and you get drug B, and what happens? It will get flattened like this. So if the graph is getting flattened, this is called a static. So static will stop the multiplication, it will not multiply further. But what about the sidal? It will kill the bacteria, so the bacterial growth decreases like this. So this case, the sidal graph. So if you're adding drug A, this is what we see sidal. If you're adding drug B, static will be appearing like this. Simple as that. Okay, so just this is the graph color presentation. So you understood what is a sidal and static. Usually sidal we use it for serious infections where the bacteria is multiplying very fast. Static can be used in minor infections, which are not that much serious. So once we are understanding this concept, that is bactericidal and static, it's now time to understand how can we stop multiplication or kill the bacteria. How can we do that? This can be done. Let us write that. So this is the bacterial cell wall. So let me give an idea for you. This is the bacterial cell wall. Now, we don't have cell wall. Humans don't have cell wall. But the bacteria have cell wall as well as they have another layer that is called the cell membrane. So they have another layer. So this is what is called as the cell membrane. They have the cell wall and they have the cell membrane. Now, they also have a mechanism from where they have DNA. From DNA, they get RNA. From the RNA, what we get is the protein synthesis. Similar to us, there is also protein synthesis. And also there is a pathway, that is metabolic pathways that will occur in a bacteria, metabolism or metabolic pathways. Now, if you want to target and kill a bacteria, we have these pathways. Where can we target? Now, first and foremost, I can target and kill the cell by inhibiting the cell wall synthesis. The first target is the cell wall. What is the second target? The second target is the cell membrane. So I can make the cell membrane permeable and then kill the bacteria. The third is I can inhibit this DNA action. Fourth, I can inhibit this protein synthesis. And fifth, I can do is I can stop this metabolic pathways. So we have 5 targets. One is the cell wall, the cell membrane, the DNA, and the protein synthesis. And the last one is to affect the metabolic pathways. So these are the different things what we have to attack this bacteria. So let's start with this and attack one by one. First, we'll attack the cell wall and see what happens. Now, before going to that, cell wall synthesis inhibitors. First and foremost, I want to tell you that whenever you imagine a bacteria, so let me give a general idea because you will be starting this bacteriology now. So remember, there are two important, one that is called gram-positive and gram-negative infection. Now, usually, a general terminology to tell you that what is the common infection by gram-negative is usually urinary tract infection or the GAT infection. It is usually by the gram-negatives. Gram-positives usually cause infections of upper respiratory tract infection, lower respiratory tract infection, and also they cause skin and soft tissue infection. So this is general. Now, I'm not giving you the entire list just to get an imagination how this will affect. Now, anaerobes, upper respiratory tract infection, lower respiratory. It is usually by to tell you that what is the common infection by gram-negative is usually urinary tract infection or the GAT infection. It is usually by the gram-negatives. Gram-positives usually cause infections of upper respiratory tract infection, lower respiratory tract infection, and also they cause skin and soft tissue infection. So this is general. Now, I'm not giving you the entire list just to get an imagination how this will affect. Now, anaerobes usually they cause abdominal infections, right? And we have atypical bacteria, and they are chlamydia, mycoplasma. These are two important atypical bacteria. One more is Legionella. Now, they are implicated in causing atypical pneumonia. And two important bacteria which we have to discuss in detail. Why? Because they are very slow multiplying. That is separately we have to discuss TB and leprosy because tuberculosis, that is Mycobacterium tuberculi and Mycobacterium leprae are the two important bacteria to discuss separately because TB is a very common communicable disease across India and we have a program for that also. So this is a general view how the bacterial infections affect us. And one more thing to be observed whenever we discuss the bacterial infection is to treat the sexual transmitted diseases, UTI, GAT infections, URTI, LRTI, skin and soft tissue infections, then TB, leprosy, and atypical bacterial infections. Okay, guys, so you got an idea now. Now let us target the cell wall and see how we can inhibit the cell wall synthesis. So first target is cell wall synthesis inhibitors. So first target is cell wall synthesis inhibitors. Now these drugs, what they do, they will not allow the cell wall to form. They will affect different pathways in cell wall synthesis. Now what happens? Now suppose there is a bacteria here. There is a bacteria, and you know that the bacteria after multiplication will give rise to two daughter bacteria. Now what we have done, we have made this cell wall defective. The cell wall is not proper now. When it multiplies, there is the mother bacteria to daughter bacteria. What we see is this cell wall is defective. So the multiplication will occur, but the cell wall which has formed now is defective. So this is the inside of this bacteria. This is also the inside of the cell membrane of the bacteria. Now what happens now? The cell wall is required by bacteria to protect it from outside environment. Now what happens whenever the cell wall is defective? The water gushes inside. So water gushes inside. So what happens when the water gushes inside this pores? Obviously the cell will have increased pressure and it will rupture. So the cell will rupture. And that's the reason these cell wall synthesis inhibitors, they are going to kill the bacteria. That's why they are called bactericidal. So usually the drugs which are going to affect cell wall, they are bactericidal, and this is how they work. So they inhibit the proper formation of bacterial cell wall, and now the cell wall is weak when there is multiplication, and that will rupture, and immediately what you see is the cidal action of the drug. Fine. Now, there are certain drugs which are cell wall synthesis inhibitors. What are the drugs which inhibit cell wall synthesis? So remember that I made a mnemonic. You remember it as BBC. So you know that BBC channel, BBC found. So what did the BBC find? Ghosts. So they found ghosts and they're putting in a new cell. So let us see what are these drugs. Now B is the beta lactams. Beta lactams. And one more B is basic. So you people leave some space and write. I will tell you why should you leave the space so that I'm writing certain points there. Next is, remember the name cycloserine. The drug name is cycloserine and found is phosphomycin. The drug name is phosphomycin. Now next is G. They are nothing but glycopeptides. So let me tell you that one glycopeptide, and that drug is called vancomycin. So the drug is vancomycin. So these are the 5 important drugs which are inhibiting cell wall synthesis. Now in cell wall synthesis, what are the steps they block? Now beta lactams inhibit a step that is called transpeptidation. So they inhibit transpeptidation. Now what does this basitracin inhibit? Basitracin inhibits bactoprenol synthesis. It will inhibit bactoprenol synthesis. There is a step in cell wall synthesis. Now what about the cycloserine? Cycloserine inhibits an enzyme called alanine racemase. This is one enzyme. And also inhibits one more enzyme that is called D-ALA. The enzyme name is another D-ALA ligase. This enzyme is inhibited by cycloserine. Phosphomycin inhibits enol pyruvate transferase. Enol pyruvate transferase. Clear? Now what about this glycopeptides? They inhibit transglycosylation. So this is inhibited by glycopeptides. So here all these steps are important in cell wall synthesis. And let me put this here so this will be easier for you to write down. They inhibit transpeptidation. So in detail, I need to discuss with you beta lactams and glycopeptides. Now let us finish off the other concept here. Now basitracin, you cannot give it IV. Systemic use of this drug is going to cause nephrotoxicity. And that's the reason we don't use it either oral or parenteral. What we use this is as a topical ointment. And it will act more on gram positive and less on gram negative. So remember, it has more action on gram positive, less on gram negative. And you can use it in skin and soft tissue. That is it either oral or parenteral. Now what about this glycopeptides? They inhibit phosphomycin inhibits cycloserine. Cycloserine inhibits an enzyme called bactoprenol synthesis. There is a step in cell wall synthesis. Now what about the cycloserine? Cycloserine inhibits an enzyme called alanine. So these are the 5 important drugs which are inhibiting cell wall synthesis. Now in cell wall synthesis, what are the steps they block? Now beta lactams inhibit a step that is called transpeptidation. So they inhibit transpeptidation. Now what does this basitracin inhibit? Basitracin inhibits bactoprenol synthesis. It will inhibit bactoprenol synthesis. There is a step in cell wall synthesis. Now what about the cycloserine? Cycloserine inhibits an enzyme called alanine racemase. This is one enzyme. And also inhibits one more enzyme that is called D-ALA. The enzyme name is another D-ALA ligase. This enzyme is inhibited by cycloserine. Phosphomycin inhibits enol pyruvate transferase. Enol pyruvate transferase. Clear? Now what about this glycopeptides? They inhibit transglycosylation. So this is inhibited by glycopeptides. So here all these steps are important in cell wall synthesis. And let me put this here so it will be easier for you to write down. They inhibit transpeptidation. So in detail, I need to discuss with you beta lactams and glycopeptides. Now let us finish off the other concept here. Now basitracin, you cannot give it IV. Systemic use of this drug is going to cause nephrotoxicity. And that's the reason we don't use it either oral or parenteral. What we use this is as a topical ointment. And it will act more on gram positive and less on gram negative. So remember, it has more action on gram positive, less on gram negative. And you can use it in skin and soft tissue infection, that is boil, furuncle and all. Now it is also used for eradicating carriers of MRSA. Carriers of MRSA eradication, we use this drug. That is basitracin. So usually the MRSA is carried in the nose. For that eradication, we apply this basitracin ointment into the nose. So usually it is applied 5 to 7 days. And that was asked in one of the recent AIMS exam. What drug is used for carriers of MRSA? Basitracin. And one more drug is the mupirocin. I'll come to that later. Now next drug is cycloserine. Now whenever you read cycloserine, read it as psych-serine. Now why should you read it as psych-serine? Because the main problem with the drug is it causes psychosis. And another issue with the drug is it causes seizures. Both the complications are seen with this drug, that is cycloserine. Now where we use this drug, it is mainly used in TB. But note down this very, very important point. I told you all cell wall synthesis inhibitors are cycle, but this is an exception. It is a tuberculostatic drug. So please note down, this is where the examiner tests you. You have a concept that all cell wall synthesis inhibitors are cycle, but one thing, this is a static. Now phosphomycin is a very good drug for treatment of urinary tract infection. It is used mainly for urinary tract infection. Now the problem is when this drug is given for UTI, patient has to suffer with diarrhea. So one of the complications with this phosphomycin is diarrhea. So BBC finally found a ghost. So what we have discussed in detail is the beta lactams and the glycopeptides. So other thing, three things we have already finished. Okay, so now we discuss the first antibacterial, and we call it as antibiotic, and that is when this drug is given. Okay, so now we discuss the first antibacterial, and we call it as antibiotic, and that is the penicillins. That is the penicillins. To understand penicillins, first and foremost, you should understand what are beta lactams. Why they are called beta lactams? Now, beta lactams, we come across four drugs in beta lactams. One is the penicillins are beta lactams. Second one is the cephalosporins, and the next one we have is carbapenems, and one more we have is monobactams. So we have this monobactam, that is penicillins, cephalosporins, carbapenems, and monobactams. Now, why they are called like that? Because they have a ring. Beta lactams have a ring, and it is like this. This is the beta lactam ring, and the nearby ring is called thiazolidine ring. So this is what we represent by the ring that is called beta lactam ring. So all of them have this beta lactam ring, and that's the reason they are called as beta lactams, because of that ring. And monobactam has only this ring, and that's why it is called monobactam, only one ring. So this is the beta lactam ring. Now let us come back to the proper penicillins. Now penicillin called thiazolidine ring. So this is what we represent by the ring that is called beta lactam ring. So all of them have this beta lactam ring, and that's the reason they are called as beta lactams, because of that ring. And monobactam has only this ring, and that's why it is called monobactam, only one ring. So this is the beta lactam ring. Now let us come back to the proper penicillins. Now penicillins thiazolidine ring. So this is what we represent by the ring that is called beta lactam ring. So all of them have this beta lactam ring, and that's the reason they are called as beta lactams, because of that ring. And monobactam has only this ring, and that's why it is called monobactam, only one ring. So this is the beta lactam ring. Now let us come back to the proper penicillins. Now penicillins, the first penicillin to be discovered is penicillin G. The first penicillin to be discovered is beta lactam ring, and that's the reason they are called as beta lactams, because of that ring. And monobactam has only this ring, and that's why it is called monobactam, only one ring. So this is the beta lactam ring. Now let us come back to the proper penicillins. Now penicillins, the first penicillin to be discovered is penicillin G. The first penicillin to be discovered is penicillin G, and it is obtained from a fungus. Now let us come back to the proper penicillins. Now penicillins, the first penicillin to be discovered is penicillin G. The first penicillin to be discovered is penicillin G, and it is obtained from a fungus. Fungus name is penicillium notatum. Now this was an accidental discovery. Usually, when we culture a bacteria, after a few days, we'll check whether the growth is happening or not. Now, what did Alexander Fleming did? He went on a vacation, he forgot to check that, and penicillium notatum. Now, this was an accidental discovery. Usually, when we culture a bacteria, after a few days, we'll check whether the growth is happening or not. Now, what did Alexander Fleming did? He went on a vacation, he forgot to check that, and there was growth of fungus on that culture. And wherever the fungus was grown, the bacteria didn't grow there. And then he come to a conclusion that there is a substance which is going to stop this multiplication or kill the bacteria. So that's the discovery of penicillin by the scientist, that is Alexander Fleming. So this is the first antibiotic to be discovered. So it was a wonder drug of that period, but it was active on gram-positive only. So it was killing only gram-positive bacteria. So at that time we didn't have so many infections, so gram-positive it was working on. Second, it was very short acting. This drug was very short acting, so repeatedly injection has to be given. Third problem is it is acid labile. That means you cannot give this drug oral. What happens if you give this drug oral? It will be destroyed by acid. So that is mean by acid labile. So you have to give this drug injectable. Third issue is later days this started acquiring resistance. So the next issue is the drug started acquiring resistance. Now these are the specialties of penicillin G. It is effect on gram-positive only, short acting, acid labile, resistance issue. So since it is acid labile, it has to be given by parenteral route. Now what the scientist thought? It is short acting. It has narrow spectrum. So what do you mean by narrow spectrum? Narrow means it will act on few bacteria, that is gram-positive, or it will act on gram-negative. Next is extended spectrum, means it will act on gram-positive, gram-negative, and few other bacteria. Now broad spectrum means it will act on bacteria. It is effect on gram-positive only, short acting, acid labile, resistance issue. So since it is acid labile, it has to be given by parenteral route. Now what the scientist thought? It is short acting. It has narrow spectrum. So what do you mean by narrow spectrum? Narrow means it will act on few bacteria, that is gram-positive, or it will act on gram-negative. Next is extended spectrum, means it will act on gram-positive, gram-negative, and few other bacteria. Now broad spectrum means it will act on bacteria, gram-positive, gram-negative, as well as atypical bacteria. Also it can cover virus or parasites. So that is called broad spectrum. Narrow, extended, broad. So broad means more bacteria can be killed. Along with that, even virus and fungus can be killed. Narrow means either it will act on gram-positive or gram-negative. Extended means it will act on gram-positive, gram-negative, and few other bacteria. So that's the thing. So this was a narrow spectrum drug. It was short acting. It was acid labile, and the issue was resistance. So the scientists thought, let us solve these issues one by one. The first issue is it is short acting. Let us make it long acting. Second is it is narrow spectrum. Let us extend its spectrum. Third, it is acid labile. So let us synthesize oral penicillin, which are acid stable. Fourth, we have a resistant issue. Let us solve that resistant issue. So like this, the discovery started. Now, do we still use this penicillin G? Yes, the penicillin G, we still use this penicillin G. Also, we call it as crystalline penicillin. It is also called as benzyl penicillin or aqueous. So all these are the shorter acting versions of penicillin G. And remember, particularly the aqueous preparation of penicillin is considered the drug of choice for neurosyphilis. neurosyphilis, the drug of choice is aqueous penicillin. This was asked in one of the recent games exam. What is the drug of choice for neurosyphilis? It is aqueous penicillin, which is very short acting. So you have to give this drug by IV route. And it can cross the blood-brain barrier, so that's why it is considered a drug of choice for neurosyphilis. Now, next, let us go by the issue. First issue I told you is short acting. Now, then they came with longer acting penicillins, or simply they are also called as deep repository penicillins. So they're also called as repository penicillin. That means you add a group for them. You add a group for them so that the drug will be released slowly from that group. For example, we have a drug that is called procaine penicillin. So if you add procaine to the penicillin, what happens? Penicillin will be released slowly from this procaine slowly. So that's the reason this drug will be long acting. So it will act for around 12 to 24 hours. That is the duration of this drug. And this drug is given intramuscular route. We give this procaine penicillin PP4 injection, or it is also called PP2. We give it by IM route. Procaine penicillin. So if you add procaine to the penicillin, what happens? Penicillin will be released slowly from this procaine slowly. So that's the reason this drug will be long acting. So it will act for around 12 to 24 hours. That is the duration of this drug. And this drug is given intramuscular route. We give this procaine penicillin PP4 injection, or it is also called PP2. We give it by IM route. Second important one is we attached one more compound that is called benzathine penicillin. The drug is called benzathine penicillin, very, very long acting. So it may act more than 21 days. Approximately, it may act for approximately 28 days. So it will be approximately acting for 28 days if you want the exact value. So this benzathine penicillin, where can you use so much long acting drug? Such a long acting drug, where can you use it? So benzathine penicillin can be used in a condition that is for rheumatic heart disease prophylaxis. So rheumatic heart disease prophylaxis, we give this drug every 21 days, one injection. Every 21 days, one injection is given. And it's a very painful injection. It has to be given IM. It's an IM injection. You cannot give this IV because you have attached benzathine to make it long acting. So much long acting, it will act for one dose, will act for 28 days. So that's the reason it is once a month, it is 21 days injection. And this is also considered drug of choice for all stages of syphilis. So it is considered drug of choice for all stages of syphilis except one. Which stage? Except neurosyphilis. The drug of choice for neurosyphilis is aqueous penicillin. So for neurosyphilis, what we use, I'm repeating again, what we use is aqueous penicillin. So that is what we achieved. When it was short acting, we made it very, very long acting drug. Clear. Now, second important thing what we have to do is, this was having narrow spectrum. The second thing what we could achieve is to make it extended spectrum penicillin. Extended spectrum, because I told you the gram negative is also the which are responsible for causing UTI as well as GI infections. So extended spectrum penicillins came into the market. Now extended spectrum penicillin, they cover both gram positive and gram negative bacteria. Both are covered by them. That is extended spectrum penicillin. Now what are the drugs we have in this category? Three categories of drugs we have. So let me highlight the three categories. One category of drug they are called as amino penicillins. They are called as amino penicillins. Amino penicillins. So they start with amine. You know the drugs already. They are ampicillin. The drug name is ampicillin. And one more drug is amoxicillin. The drug name is amoxicillin. Both of them start with AM. One is ampicillin and one is what? Amoxicillin. Next we have another group of drugs. They are called as carboxypenicillins. Now simply what they did is they added an amino group to the beta lactam, or they added carboxy to the original penicillin. Then they became extended spectrum. Now this carboxy which is being added, made this drug to work on this gram negative also. What are these carboxypenicillins? They are nothing but carpenicillin, and one more drug is picaxilin. Now the usage of these drugs have come down. What are commonly used nowadays are these drugs that are called uridopenicillins. Drugs are called uridopenicillins. So what are these uridopenicillins we have? The uridopenicillins are piperacillin, it is piperacillin, azlocillin, and meslocillin. So these are the three categories of drugs which we call as extended spectrum penicillins: amino, carboxy, and uridopenicillin. And please note down the last two categories of drugs, that is carboxy and urido. They are also called as anti-pseudomonal penicillin. What is pseudomonas? Pseudomonas is a very, very important bacteria because it's an opportunistic, it's an infection which is seen in hospital, in ICUs. So this is very important. This is called anti-pseudomonal penicillins. Anti-pseudomonal penicillin, that is carboxy and urido. Particularly what we use in the practice is mainly piperacillin. Now we have aminopenicillin, ampicillin, amoxicillin. So let us understand what is the difference between them. Why should we use one commonly and what about the other drug? Any differences there? So let me see with that. This is called anti-pseudomonal penicillins. Anti-pseudomonal penicillin, that is carboxy and urido. Particularly what we use in the practice is mainly piperacillin. Now we have aminopenicillin, ampicillin, amoxicillin. So let us understand what is the difference between them. Why should we use one commonly and what about the other drug? Any differences there? So let me see with that. So what is the difference between amoxicillin and ampicillin? Let me write for you all. So let me write amoxicillin. So this is very important. This is called anti-pseudomonal penicillins. Anti-pseudomonal penicillin, that is carboxy and urido. Particularly what we use in the practice is mainly piperacillin. Now we have aminopenicillin, ampicillin, amoxicillin. So let us understand what is the difference between them. Why should we use one commonly and what about the other drug? Any differences there? So let me see with that. So what is the difference between amoxicillin and ampicillin? Let me write for you all. So let me write amoxicillin here. And on the side, let me write ampicillin. So what is the difference we have? So first and foremost, this amoxicillin is longer acting compared to ampicillin. So if you are giving amoxicillin, it has to be given 3 times in a day. But ampicillin, you have to give 4 times in a day because it is shorter acting. Second important thing is this amoxicillin is completely absorbed. So it is completely absorbed in the intestine. So it will not come to the large intestine that much. So this is not completely absorbed. Not completely absorbed. So what is the problem? Whether it is completely absorbed or not absorbed. Now what happens if it is not completely absorbed? This drug will go to the large intestine and kill the normal flora. We have normal flora inside our large intestine, which is required for example, synthesizing vitamin K, and they are good bacteria first. And they will also defend us against the bad bacteria. Second important thing is this amoxicillin is completely absorbed. So it is completely absorbed in the intestine. It has to be given 3 times in a day. But ampicillin, you have to give 4 times in a day because it is shorter acting. Second important thing is this amoxicillin is completely absorbed. So it is completely absorbed in the intestine. So 3 times in a day. But ampicillin, you have to give 4 times in a day because it is shorter acting. Second important thing is this amoxicillin is completely absorbed. So it is completely absorbed in the intestine. So it will not come to the large intestine that much. So this is not completely absorbed. Not completely absorbed. What is the problem? Whether it is completely absorbed or not absorbed. Now what happens if it is not completely absorbed? This drug will go to the large intestine and kill the normal flora. We have normal flora inside our large intestine, which is required for example, synthesizing vitamin K, and they are good bacteria first. And they will also defend us against the bad bacteria. Now when it is not completely absorbed, amoxicillin or ampicillin will go to that site and kill our own good bacteria. So the pathological bacteria keep on multiplying. So what patient will suffer now is the episode of diarrhea. So patient will complain of diarrhea. Since this amoxicillin is completely absorbed, it will not go to the large intestine. So it will cause less diarrhea. I don't tell completely there will be absence of diarrhea, but less diarrhea compared to ampicillin. The third important aspect is this ampicillin, because it is not completely absorbed, it will go to the large intestine. It is cleaved by the bacteria, so it will undergo enterohepatic recycling. And this will not undergo. Now when we use this amoxicillin, we use this amoxicillin along with the beta-lactamase inhibitor that is called clavulanic acid. Now when we combine with clavulanic acid, because their half-life to pharmacokinetics matches, that's the reason. And this combination is usually used for treating upper respiratory tract infection, and also to treat lower respiratory tract infections, and also in treatment of mastitis. In the treatment of mastitis, we can also use this amoxicillin and clavulanic acid combination. Particularly, the separate drug amoxicillin is also used in the regimen that is called H. pylori eradication. There also we use only amoxicillin. We don't require clavulanic acid there. Right? So that's why I've written separately. Now here, where we use this ampicillin, ampicillin is highly effective on H. influenza and Shigella infection. It is highly effective on H. influenza and Shigella infection, but not amoxicillin. And it is used in combination with, ampicillin is used in combination with a drug by the name sulbactam. So it's a beta-lactamase inhibitors. Along with that, what we use is ampicillin, and let me extend those differences. Okay, so this is ampicillin. Now, when we use ampicillin as drug of choice, ampicillin is considered drug of choice in case of managing enterococcus, a bacteria called fecalis. It is used as drug of choice for enterococcus fecalis, and one more condition is listeriosis. Now, for your exam purpose, remember ampicillin, so fecalis and listeriosis, we use this ampicillin. We can also use for H. influenza and Shigella, but it is considered drug of choice in these conditions. Now, both the drugs, they are called aminopenicillins. Now, what is the common problem what we have to face with these drugs? Now, when we use these drugs, one important problem is when by knowing unknowingly, suppose you are treating an infection, they come with upper respiratory tract infection, you don't know whether it is Epstein-Barr virus or not. Now, both the drugs, they are called aminopenicillins. Now, what is the common problem what we have to face with these drugs? Now, when we use these drugs, one important problem is when by knowing unknowingly, suppose you are treating an infection, they come with upper respiratory tract infection, you don't know whether it is Epstein-Barr virus or not. Many times they can produce rash if you are using it for Epstein-Barr virus. And similarly, they also can cause allergy in other conditions. Whatever you use, amoxicillin, ampicillin, they are penicillin derivatives, they can cause allergy, and that was asked in one of the INICT. Yes, they are. These drugs, one important problem is when by knowing unknowingly, suppose you are treating an infection, they come with upper respiratory tract infection, you don't know whether it is Epstein-Barr virus. Now, both the drugs, they are called aminopenicillins. Now, what is the common problem what we have to face with these drugs? Now, when we use these drugs, one important problem is when by knowing unknowingly, suppose you are treating an infection, they come with upper respiratory tract infection, you don't know whether it is Epstein-Barr virus or not. Many times they can produce rash if you are using it for Epstein-Barr virus. And similarly, they also can cause allergy in other conditions. Whatever you use, amoxicillin, ampicillin, they are penicillin derivatives, they can cause allergy, and that was asked in one of the INICT. Yes, they are penicillin group, they will cause allergy. They both will cause allergy. So you can write allergy here. And allergy usually presents as rash. Right. Now, I told you these drugs can cause diarrhea, one causes less diarrhea, and another causes more diarrhea. The problem with these drugs are they both can cause a condition that is called pseudomembranous colitis. Pseudomembranous colitis. So it is a condition where the Clostridium difficile start multiplying when you use the antibiotic excessively. The same thing is also seen by ampicillin also, but it is lesser compared to amoxicillin. Both will cause pseudomembranous enterocolitis. Only thing is if you're using them for very long period. Okay, so that's the difference between the drugs amoxicillin and ampicillin. Just pause this video, just have a look what is the difference between them. Amoxicillin and ampicillin. Now, amoxicillin and ampicillin, just pause this video. Just have a look what is the difference between them. Amoxicillin and ampicillin. Now, we have extended the spectrum as promised. I didn't expect that. I didn't do that. So scientists did that. Now, what is the third thing what we have to do is these are acid labile. So third concept what we have to do with the penicillin is we have to make this penicillin acid stable. So we call that as acid stable, or simply you can give them oral. We call them as oral penicillins. So many of the penicillin we have to give injectable. Do we have oral penicillin? Yes. Already we have discussed. So we remember the mnemonic OC. What? Let us remember by the mnemonic OC. What? Now what is that O? O stands for oxacillin. And for this oxacillin, just add Cl. It will become cloxacillin. For this cloxacillin, just add di. Here, it will become dicloxacillin. Here is. So you have to derive from these things. Same thing. Only thing is we are adding these things to that. And one more drug what we have is the drug by the name penicillin B. So penicillin B. And already we have discussed two drugs. One is called amoxicillin. And one more drug is ampicillin. They can also be given oral ampicillin. That's the reason they cause diarrhea when we give them oral. So these are the drugs which are called as oral penicillin. But in practice nowadays, what we have, even textbook they have, but these are the three things which we are using: amoxicillin, dicloxacillin, ampicillin. These are the ones which are there in the practice, and all others are outdated. But in the class, we have to tell all these drugs for you. So amoxicillin, dicloxacillin, and ampicillin are the ones which are being used. And dicloxacillin can be used in the treatment of mastitis. Now, what is mastitis and all? I will tell you later. You know that itis, any inflammation, infection of the breast. So infection of the breast, mainly the bacteria responsible for that is Staph aureus. For that we use dicloxacillin. Okay, so the fourth issue what we had to face with the drugs is the resistance. Now, how to overcome this resistant issue? So resistance. So what is resistance? That means the bacteria was killed by these drugs before. Now they are not being are the ones which are being used. And dicloxacillin can be used in the treatment of mastitis. Now, what is mastitis and all? I will tell you later. You know that itis, any inflammation, infection of the breast. So infection of the breast, mainly the bacteria responsible for that is Staph aureus. For that we use dicloxacillin. Okay, so the fourth issue what we had to face with the drugs is the resistance. Now, how to overcome this resistant issue? So resistance. So what is resistance? That means the bacteria was killed by these drugs before. Now they are not being killed. Now, how the bacteria acquire resistance? There are two ways. So let me come to the concept. First, I'm giving you one simple example. So let me assume that this is your house, and in that house you have kept 10 kg of gold. So you have kept 10 kg of gold. So let us assume that you will have 10 kg of gold in your house, and you want to protect that. How will you protect? Think of this. Pause this video and check. First, you will put a guard. He will try to protect the house. Second, you will put a very good lock so that thieves will not enter inside. By chance, if they enter inside, you will put one more guard inside who will push them out. So one, you can keep a guard. Second, you don't allow their entry. Third, you can push them out. Fourth, what you can do? You can tell me. Fourth, what you can do is you can alter this. So what you do? You tell them we have kept 10 kg of gold here, but actually you keep the 10 kg gold in somewhere, and instead of that, you keep 10 kg of iron here. So you alter that where you have kept and don't tell them. So same thing. The bacteria are also intelligent. They can also produce something called, the first one they can do is inactivating enzyme. So they can produce inactivating enzymes which can inactivate the drug so that the drug will not touch this bacteria. So this is what I told you, your house. This is the bacteria and how it protects itself by producing inactivating enzymes. Second, how this inhibits the drug entry. So it inhibits drug entry. That is the second mechanism of resistance. Third mechanism of resistance is the throwing out. What we tell in a Polish language is efflux pump. So they will have efflux pump to throw the antimicrobial out. Fourth is by targeting. So the fourth one is altering the target. So they will just alter the target. So that if they alter the target, even that antimicrobial drug cannot work. So same option was given in one of the GPO exam. All are factors responsible for antimicrobial resistance except. So these three options were given. One option was changed by inhibiting DNA agarase. So inhibition of DNA agarase is for mechanism of action. So resistance is mainly by four: inactivating enzyme, drug entry, efflux pump, and altering the target. These are four ways of acquiring resistance. Now, how the bacteria acquire resistance? This is taught to you in bacteriology by microbiology, but still for you to integrate the topics. Now, one way is by vertical transfer, and one other way is by horizontal transfer. Now, how does the vertical transmission occur? Suppose this is the mother bacteria. From the mother bacteria, we will get the daughter bacteria, and here it will go from mother to daughter bacteria. It is vertical. Now, what about the horizontal way of transfer? This is one bacteria, and this is another bacteria. So let me change the color. And from this bacteria, which is already acquired resistance, the resistance gene will be transferred to the susceptible bacteria. And this is why we call it as horizontal, from one bacteria to other. Now, there are certain processes through which it will occur. One is called transduction, conjugation, and transformation. So these are steps, different types through which the resistance is transferred to the susceptible bacteria: transduction, conjugation, and transformation. Now, the bacteria became so intelligent. What happened? They started forming a group. And we call it as quorum sensing. So quorum, the literal meaning is a group of people. So quorum sensing is one thing. So they start sensing whenever we give an antimicrobial, and they try to protect them. So this is the fifth way of acquiring resistance. That is group. Previously they were individual. Now they started forming a group and they started sensing this. That is what we call as quorum sensing, which will be responsible for resistance. Now the sixth one is they started forming biofilm. So the resistance is like this. They started forming biofilm. Suppose a catheter is being placed in the urethra. Now what happens? The bacteria start growing there. Now when the bacteria multiply, they are becoming so intelligent. Suppose these are the group of bacteria. What they will do is they will form a biofilm around them, like this. Now even if you give antimicrobials, the antimicrobials cannot penetrate this biofilm. So see how intelligent they are and how they try to stop our drug penetration. So these are different ways how the bacteria acquire resistance to the drug. So let us now target how these penicillins can overcome this resistance. Okay, so let us see how these penicillins can be used to overcome resistance. To understand that, let me write a structure of beta-lactam. So the beta-lactam looks like this. I've given the structure already. The beta-lactam looks like this. And the beta-lactam ring is this one, the square one. And the adjacent one is called thiazolidine ring. Suppose we have a bacteria. Let us assume that it's a gram-negative bacteria. So here there is a bacteria. and we are giving this beta-lactam. Now, how the beta-lactam will work? Beta-lactam mechanism of action, let me explain to you. Now, whenever they are forming a cell wall, there is something called N-acetyl muramic acid, and there is something called N-acetyl glucosamine. So these are the two compounds which are formed when there is cell wall synthesis. Now, these compounds has to be cross-linked. So there are so many compounds like this, multiple copies of this NAM, NAG. So these has to be cross-linked. So cross-linking will increase the strength of this beta-lactam. Now, this cross-linking is done by a bacteria called, not a bacteria, by an enzyme called transpeptidase. So transpeptidase is the one which is going to cause this cross-linking. So we call it as cross-linking, and this cross-linking will increase the strength of the bacterial cell wall. Similar, you have seen the house construction, we keep the bricks and cement. Cement will act as a brick, and the cement will make the wall very much strengthened. Same thing, this cross-linking. Now, when I use a penicillin, what happens when I use a penicillin? Penicillin comes and sits on a protein called penicillin binding protein. So where does penicillin do? It will come and bind to a penicillin binding protein on the bacteria. So there is a spot for that. It will come and sit on the penicillin binding protein, and after binding to that, it will inhibit this enzyme. So which enzyme is inhibited? Transpeptidase. And if that is inhibited, the cell wall becomes weak. So what happens? Cell wall will become weak. And what happens later? The cell wall will undergo lysis. And that's the reason these are called bactericidal in nature. So this is what it will do to the bacteria. But bacteria also are brilliant. How brilliant? Suppose this is a bacteria. Now, what does the bacteria will do? Bacteria will synthesize an enzyme called beta-lactamase. So this is what I told you before. It is an inactivating enzyme. So it will synthesize beta-lactamase. Now, what is the function of beta-lactamase? Is to cut this ring. What happens? It will cut the ring. Same question was asked in the recent exam. What is the function of beta-lactamase? The enzyme will cut the ring. It will cut the ring. Now, if you cut the ring, what happens? The drug becomes ineffective. If you cut the ring, the drug becomes ineffective. Now it cannot work. So this is one way the bacteria have acquired resistance. Now, second way, what the bacteria can do is they can alter the target. I told you, one is by inactivating enzyme. Second, suppose this is the penicillin binding protein, and you can see the structure here, written here. It is like this. Now, what the bacteria will do, they will alter the penicillin binding protein. So they will change the shape like this. Now, when they alter the target, the penicillin now cannot sit on this because the target is altered. Because of altered penicillin binding protein. So this is one more problem. The first is by producing beta-lactamase. Second is by altering the penicillin binding protein. Two ways it can do these issues. Now, how do we overcome this issue? First, let us block the enzyme which is cutting the ring, that is beta-lactamase. Second, let us see what we can do with altered penicillin binding protein. So let me first introduce the drugs. They are called beta-lactamase inhibitors. The drugs are called beta-lactamase inhibitors. Now, these drugs, they themselves have no antibacterial activity except few. They inhibit the enzyme beta-lactamase. Now, what are those? One is called clavulanic acid. And one more is sulbactam. The drug name is sulbactam. And one more drug is tazobactam. Right. So these are usually used with penicillin. So clavulanic acid is combined with amoxicillin. Sulbactam is combined with ampicillin. And tazobactam is combined with piperacillin. Now, I will introduce another two beta-lactamase inhibitors. They are called oborbactam. Oborbactam is used with a cephalosporin that is called ceftazidime. And one more is avibactam. It is called avibactam, and that is used along with a drug called meropen. So what is the advantage of adding them? Advantage of adding them is, suppose amoxicillin is killing a gram-negative bacteria. Now that bacteria started producing beta-lactamase. Now amoxicillin cannot kill that. So if I use clavulanic acid, it will inhibit that, and then amoxicillin can work. So let me show you that example. Suppose I give amoxicillin alone to kill a bacteria. Now bacteria will defend it by producing beta-lactamase. It will produce beta-lactamase and try to kill this amoxicillin. Now I don't want that to occur. So what I do, I will combine this with clavulanic acid. It will keep this beta-lactamase inhibited. Now amoxicillin can come and kill this bacteria. So this is the reason why we combine penicillins or cephalosporins or carbapenems with beta-lactamase inhibitors. So that is the concept. They will extend their action, their spectrum of activity. So one thing what we can do is beta-lactamase, you can combine with penicillin or these three drugs. I told you that. Now beta-lactamase usually means they can cleave penicillin, we call it as penicillinase. So if they produce only the penicillinase, we call it as penicillin. They cleave only penicillin. If they cleave cephalosporin, we call it as cephalosporinase. Then carbapenemase and monobactamase. Right. So these are the different varieties of beta-lactamase we have. So beta-lactamase generally can cleave these things. There are different varieties. I made a separate video for that. You can see it there. Because if I tell everything here, the video becomes so lengthy. So I want to finish only penicillin here. Then we will discuss beta-lactamase in detail in one more small topic which I covered. Okay, guys. Yes. Now penicillinase is going to cut the ring of penicillins. So it is going to cut the ring of penicillins. Now this penicillinase is specifically synthesized by one bacteria, and that is called Staphylococcus. So the bacteria which synthesizes this penicillinase is none other than Staphylococci. The bacteria is called Staphylococcus. Usually it is called Staphylococcus aureus. Yes, this is the one which is producing penicillin. Now, why we are discussing about the Staph aureus so much? What is the importance of this? Do we see this Staph aureus every day in the clinic? Are the patient affected with Staph aureus and coming to our clinic? Yes. Hospital? Yes. Because Staph aureus is one of the bacteria which is gram-positive, which is implicated in causing what are the infections usually? They produce skin and soft tissue infection. That means if a patient comes with simple itis, that is folliculitis, carbuncle, even diabetic foot, mastitis, that the most common bacteria what we can see is Staph aureus. That's the reason we have to kill this. Second, it is also responsible for community-acquired pneumonia and also responsible for hospital-acquired pneumonia. That is a lung infection. Because of this, we need to kill this Staph aureus. Now, Staph aureus started producing penicillinase. And because it started producing penicillinase, now the beta lactams, particularly the penicillins, because penicillins give penicillin, penicillins cannot work now. So then the scientists thought, let us produce penicillins which are resistant to this, and they are called penicillinase resistant penicillin. They are called penicillinase resistant penicillins. Or simply, can I call them as anti-staphylococcal? Yes. Also called as anti-staphylococcal penicillins. Because staphylococcus is the one which is producing penicillin. So they made a structure of the drug such that this structure cannot be cleaved by this penicillin. So this is made strong. Now, what are the drugs which are used for this staphylococcus infection? The drugs we remember as DON-CM. So when the DON enters, particularly DON-CM, Chief Minister, so everybody has to be quiet. Now, what are the drugs? D stands for, you already know these drugs. Dicloxacillin. O for oxacillin. N for nafacillin. C, just add Cl, it will become cloxacillin. And M for methicillin. So these are called anti-staphylococcal penicillin, DON-CM. These are called. Now, among that, what are the drugs which can be given oral? Dicloxacillin, oxacillin, and cloxacillin. These are oral ones. You can give them oral. Now, these Staph aureus, which is susceptible to methicillin, which is anti-staphylococcal penicillin, we call them as methicillin susceptible Staph aureus. Suppose a patient comes with you to your clinic or hospital with mastitis. What is mastitis? It is an infection of the breast, and most commonly it is caused by which bacteria? Staph aureus. And if it is methicillin sensitive Staph aureus, obviously you can give any of these things. So particularly in practice, I told you we are using dicloxacillin. You can use dicloxacillin. But in practice, what we do, we usually combine, by treating this, we usually give a combination of amoxicillin plus clavulanic acid. Now, you told sir amoxicillin cannot kill this, but the penicillinase can be inhibited by the clavulanate. That's the reason this is the best drug to be used in case of mastitis. Not only mastitis, furunculosis, carbuncle, folliculitis, all this case you can use amoxicillin plus clavulanic acid. The bacteria which is going to cause this Staph aureus, which is called methicillin sensitive Staph aureus. Why it is called methicillin? Because we use methicillin to check the sensitivity. That's why. Otherwise, if they use nafacillin, it would have become nafacillin sensitive Staph aureus. Right. Now, the problem with these drugs are oxacillin is not used nowadays because of hepatotoxicity. It is hepatotoxic. Second, nafacillin causes interstitial nephritis. It causes interstitial nephritis. So that's the problem with the drug. Same problem is caused by another drug that is called methicillin. Methicillin also causes interstitial nephritis. And one more issue with nafacillin, it causes neutropenia. That's the reason we don't use these drugs. And what we use is dicloxacillin. Clear, guys? So this is what we mean by treating a simple case of mastitis. Suppose a mastitis patient doesn't come with mastitis. Suppose she comes with breast abscess. If she comes with breast abscess, now usually in an abscess, the antimicrobial penetration is not that much. So better to do incision and drainage. If she walks into the hospital with breast abscess, do incision and drainage, and then put her on antimicrobial therapy. That is amoxicillin plus clavulanic acid. You can put her. Amox plus clav. Suppose they ask this question, what is the best treatment? She comes with breast abscess, they are given amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, incision drainage. So incision drainage is the best one. Suppose the patient comes with abscess, first drain the abscess. Without draining the abscess, if you give this drug, the abscess will say that patient will have more pain. So first thing, if she comes with abscess, incision drainage. But if she comes with initial stages of mastitis, then you can give antimicrobial treatment of Okay, so this Staph aureus is sensitive to methicillin. Now it became more brilliant. How brilliant? Now this started becoming resistant to methicillin. Now this Staph aureus which became resistant to that is called MRSA. The full form, it is called methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Now how did that become resistant? Now this became resistant by alteration of penicillin binding protein, which I showed you already. So if this is a penicillin binding protein, now this got altered. Now because this got altered, no penicillin can bind or any beta lactam. No beta lactam can work on this. No beta lactam because all the beta lactams, either it is penicillin, cephalosporin, minobactams, or carbapenems, all of them have to sit on this and work. Now the structure, that is penicillin binding protein, is altered. So no beta lactam can work except, this is what I learned when I was preparing for entrance, but now we have a drug which are called except the fifth generation cephalosporin. Now these fifth generation cephalosporins, they act by another adjacent protein. They don't act here. That's why they can be used in treatment of MRSA. So the problem in MRSA is the alteration of penicillin binding protein. Now you cannot use any beta lactam. Now what to do? If the patient presents with this, now let me give you the gene. It is because of chromosomal transfer, and it is because of the mutation in MECA gene. Now you cannot use any beta lactam. Then how do you treat the MRSA infection? For MRSA, nowadays the drug of choice or first line of drug of choice is vancomycin. The drug of choice is vancomycin because vancomycin acts by binding to other side, not to penicillin binding protein. It inhibits transglycosylation. So later what happened? Even the vancomycin started acquiring resistance because in that, what happened in that, the VRSA, that is vancomycin resistant Staph aureus, they started altering the position of D-lactate. So this is the point where vancomycin was working, and that was altered by the Staph aureus. Now we don't have any drug now. So we had one drug which was acting on cell wall vancomycin. Now VRSA altered that. So now the drug of choice for this VRSA will be daptomycin, and the daptomycin works on cell membrane. See how intelligent the bacteria are, how we start targeting to kill it again and again. So this is how MRSA is being asked repeatedly in exams, because we see these cases every day in hospitals. Clear, guys? So that is about the treatment aspect of MRSA, and where it is the drug of choice is vancomycin, VRSA drug of choice is daptomycin. But the problem with daptomycin is inactivated by pulmonary surfactant. So pulmonary, that is in the lungs, we have surfactant that can inactivate this drug. Suppose the patient comes with VRSA pneumonia. He has VRSA and the lung infection has occurred. Can we use daptomycin? No, because daptomycin is inactivated. So we should use the drug which achieves that and that is called linezolid. So for that, the drug of choice becomes linezolid. So we start using linezolid in this patient. Okay, so that is about the resistant issue. We have solved that. You know how we solve this. Okay, moving on to the last point, that is the uses and adverse reactions of penicillins. So where do you use this penicillins? Penicillins are used in a pneumonia, as we say, and the lung infection has occurred. Can we use daptomycin? No, because daptomycin is inactivated. So we should use the drug acute that, and that is called linezolid. So for that, the drug of choice becomes linezolid. So we start using linezolid in this patient. Okay, so that is about the resistant issue. We have solved that. You know how we solve this. Okay, moving on to the last point, that is the uses and adverse reactions of penicillins. So where do you use this penicillins? Penicillins are used in one is called leptospirosis. It is used in leptospirosis, and one more condition is listeriosis. Then it is also used in actinomyces infection, and it is also used for syphilis. And for syphilis, these penicillins are considered the drug of choice, which I already explained to you. It is also used for managing tetanus and for meningococcal meningitis. So meningococcal meningitis. So if meningococcal is susceptible to penicillin, then we can use penicillin itself. Then anthrax, gas gangrene, yaws. For yaws also, this is considered the drug of choice. Then rat bite fever. So these are the indications of penicillins. You can remember by the mnemonic LAST. So last Maggie remains. So if there is a last Maggie remaining, you have to remember this mnemonic, then eat the Maggie. So these are the uses of the drug penicillins. Now, is there any adverse reaction with these drugs? Maggie remains. So if there is a last Maggie remaining, you have to remember this mnemonic, then eat the Maggie. So these are the uses of the drug penicillins. Now, is there any adverse reaction with these drugs? Now, since it is obtained from a fungus, the fungus is always antigenic. Suppose we want to inject that penicillin, obviously our body will get an immune response. So first and foremost, when we give this drug, we have to face hypersensitivity reaction. Particularly, it is type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So the patient may have anaphylactic shock. So to avoid this, we always have to give a test dose. So whenever you are giving penicillin, remember you have to give test dose. And what is the route through which we give test dose in area? It is given through intradermal route. Second, it also shows cross allergy. That means if a person is allergic to cephalosporin, he is also allergic to penicillin. That is called cross allergy. Third, they are known to produce a reaction that is called Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. So that is called Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. Now this is a reaction elicited by the body against the syphilis bacteria, that is Treponema pallidum. So whenever we use penicillin, the bacteria will be killed, and the bacterial structures, they act as an antigen, and they start a reaction throughout the body, that is called Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. Now for this, no need to stop the drug, just you can give sedation and aspirin. This will help in treating them. This much is fine for managing Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. Cross allergy. Third, they are known to produce a reaction that is called Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. So that is called Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. Now this is a reaction elicited by the body against the syphilis bacteria, that is Treponema pallidum. So whenever we use penicillin, the bacteria will be killed, and the bacterial structures, they act as an antigen, and they start a reaction throughout the body, that is called Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. Now for this, no need to stop the drug, just you can give sedation and aspirin. This will help in treating them. This much is fine for managing Zarich-Alzheimer reaction. Fourth important that we already discussed is the interstitial aperitis. So that is caused by two drugs. One is nafacillin, and one more drug is methicillin. So these drugs are going to cause interstitial aperitis. So this is the first drug in antibacterial drugs we have finished. That is first beta lactam, that is penicillin. We are done with the concept, why the penicillin, how it was developed, what are the infections they are used, and what is their adverse reaction.